Welcome to NFL Nexus, where we really try to get to the bottom of the biggest stories in the league. And today, man, we are digging into a real head-scratcher from this year's coaching cycle, the whole situation with Brian Flores. You've got a coach with a resume that just screams head coach, but he's still a coordinator. Why is that? Well, that's what we're going to investigate, piece by piece. So this is it. This is the central question that's going to drive this whole explainer. It's a genuine mystery, right? You have a coach who is, by pretty much any metric, at the absolute top of his game. He's turning defenses into some of the most feared units in the entire league. And yet, when the music stops on the head coaching carousel, he's the one left without a chair. So how does that happen? What's really going on here? We're going to follow the evidence and try to find some answers.
Okay, let's dive right in. Here's the roadmap for how we're going to break this all down. First up, we'll establish what we're calling the Flores paradox. You know, his elite results versus his current job title. Then we'll watch how the coaching carousel spun this cycle. From there, we'll zoom in on Pittsburgh's big decision, which really felt like his best shot. After that, well, we have to look at the unspoken factors that might be playing a role behind the scenes. And finally, we'll see how this whole thing actually turns into a huge win for the Minnesota Vikings.
So let's start with part one, the Flores paradox. This is really the core contradiction we need to wrap our heads around. On one hand, you have these undeniable, top-tier results that he gets on the football field. And on the other hand, you have his job title, defensive coordinator. You know, these two things they don't seem to add up. And that's exactly what makes his story so fascinating and worth digging into. Okay, so let's just look at the evidence for his elite status. For the last 2 seasons, the Minnesota Vikings have been a top 3 defense in the entire NFL, and that's measured by opponent EPA per play. For those of you who don't follow the advanced stats, EPA, or expected points added, is just a much smarter way to measure performance than, say, just total yards. It looks at how every single play affects a team's chances of scoring. So to be in the top 3 for 2 years running, that's a sign of a true defensive mastermind. He does it with this super aggressive, really complex scheme that just baffles offenses. And, this is key, it makes his own players better. Guys all over that defense, from superstars to role players, are having the best seasons of their careers under his watch. That right there is the mark of a great, great coach. And after all of that, after building a statistical powerhouse and getting every last drop of talent out of his players, this is his title. Still a defensive coordinator. It's a jarring contrast, isn't it? The on-field performance is that of a premier head coach, someone who can build the entire identity of a franchise, yet he's still in a coordinator role. This is the paradox, and it's why we're going this deep. The performance and the position just don't match. Okay, so let's move on to our next section. We're going to look at the 2026 coaching cycle itself and really track how the opportunities just disappeared. For a candidate like Flores, every time another team makes a hire, that's a door closing. We're about to watch that window of opportunity get smaller and smaller and smaller until it finally slams shut. So here are the dominoes as they fell this year. The Baltimore Ravens, who actually did interview Flores, they went with Jesse Minter. The Giants nabbed John Harbaugh. The Falcons hired Kevin Stefanski. The Dolphins went with Jeff Hafley. And the Titans hired Robert Saleh. With every single one of these announcements, the number of open jobs just kept shrinking. Flores was on the outside looking in. And then finally, the one job that seemed the most likely, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they made their choice, hiring Mike McCarthy. 6 jobs, all filled up. Now let's look at the actual interest Flores got. According to our sources, he had just 3 interviews this entire cycle. And only 2 of those were for a head coaching job, the Steelers and the Ravens. As we just saw, both teams went a different way. His only other interview was for a lateral move, the DC job in Washington. For a coach with his kind of track record, being a top candidate for only 2 head coaching spots, that is remarkably low, and it really suggests that something else might be going on here. So, and this is a really critical point, even after those first few jobs were filled, there were still 4 teams with openings. The Cardinals, the Bills, the Browns, and the Raiders all needed a new head coach. And yet, not a single one of them even brought Brian Flores in for an interview. The door on the 2026 cycle didn't just close on him, it was basically bolted shut. Our sources do note he turned down the Cardinals once before, but still, for 4 teams with openings to not even have a conversation with him, that's a massive red flag, and it just makes this whole situation even more of a mystery. Now let's really zoom in on the situation that felt like the one. Section 3, Pittsburgh's pivotal decision. Of all the possible openings this year, the Steelers just seemed like the most realistic, the most logical, and maybe the last real shot for Brian Flores to land a head coaching job. On paper, it had all the makings of a perfect. So let's trace Flores' path in Pittsburgh because it really tells a story. First off, he had a direct connection there. He'd worked as a senior defensive assistant and linebackers coach under the one and only Mike Tomlin back in 2022. That is a huge advantage, right? They know him, he knows their system. Because of that, he wasn't just some courtesy interview. Sources say he was a very serious candidate, one of their top options. And the proof is right there. He got 2 interviews, and that second one was in person during the final week of their search. All the signs were pointing to him being a legitimate frontrunner for the job. And this slide just perfectly illustrates the final choice the Steelers were looking at. It's a really fascinating contrast. In one corner, you have Brian Flores, a guy who's worked in the building, a defensive genius known for these cutting-edge aggressive schemes, and clearly a serious contender, getting 2 interviews. Then in the other corner, you have Mike McCarthy. He's the hometown kid, a Pittsburgh native, he's got the weight of a Super Bowl ring, and this is critical, he already had relationships with their GM and assistant GM. So you have 2 very different, but very compelling stories for the organization to choose from. And then, this is the tweet from Tom Pelissero at NFL Network that officially put an end to all the speculation. Coming home, the Steelers are working towards a deal to hire Mike McCarthy as their head coach. Per sources, the Super Bowl winner gets a chance to coach the team he grew up rooting for. You know, the language there is really telling. It's all about the story. Coming home, the team he grew up rooting for. In the end, the Steelers went with that powerful narrative of the local kid making good, and that decision officially closed the last real door for Brian Flores this year. But here's where the timeline gets really fascinating. It suggests a very smart, very strategic move by Flores and his team. So check this out. On Tuesday, Flores has that huge second in-person interview with Pittsburgh. The very next day, on Wednesday, news suddenly breaks that he's agreed to a contract extension to stay with the Minnesota Vikings. Then, a few days later on Saturday, the Steelers officially announced they're hiring Mike McCarthy. The sequence strongly suggests that after his interview on Tuesday, Flores got the feeling he wasn't going to be the guy. So instead of waiting around to be publicly rejected, he took control of the situation and locked in his future in Minnesota. Just a really savvy move in a tough spot. Hey, before we get into this next, more complicated part of the story, just a quick word. We absolutely love breaking down these NFL stories for you, and if you enjoy what we do and want to help support the channel, a really fun way to do that is by grabbing one of our Football Fun coloring books. Seriously, they're not just for kids, they're perfect for any fan of any age to just relax and unwind. It's a great way to distress while helping us out here at NFL Nexus. You can find the link in the description or just scan the QR code on your screen. We really, really appreciate the support. All right, let's wade into the most complex part of this story. Section 4, the unspoken factors. So, with the 2026 coaching door officially closed on him and seeing him get passed over despite being so qualified, you have to ask the bigger question, right? We need to explore the potential roadblocks that our source material points to, the things that don't show up on a resume but might be having a huge impact on his career. So what are these other factors at play? Why would teams be hesitant to even interview, let alone hire, a coach who has proven, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he can build a top 3 defense? It's really the elephant in the room whenever you talk about Brian Flores' career. And our sources point to 2 major specific issues. The sources we've looked up for this are pretty clear in highlighting 2 potential off-the-field factors. First, and this is the most public one, is his ongoing lawsuit against the NFL itself, which alleges racial discrimination in their hiring practices. You really can't overstate how big of a deal it is for a coach to be actively suing the league. The second factor is the reported drama from behind the scenes at the end of his time as head coach of the Miami Dolphins, back from 2019 to 2021. At the time, there were reports about disagreements with the front office and his starting quarterback. Now, our job here isn't to take a side, but simply to report that these are the 2 things that sources suggest might be making NFL owners think twice, no matter how good of a coach he is. Okay, let's shift gears now and look at the major fallout from all this. Because while Brian Flores may have lost out on a head coaching job this year, there is one very clear winner in this whole saga. Section 5, a Vikings victory. We're going to look at how every other team passing on him became a massive, massive gain for Minnesota. The 2026 season will now be Brian Flores' 4th year as the defensive coordinator for the Vikings. Think about that. In the world of the NFL where coaches are constantly coming and going, that kind of continuity for a coordinator, especially one this good, is unbelievably rare and so valuable. Our sources say the Vikings are absolutely thrilled to have him back, and of course they are. They get to keep the architect of their team's biggest strength, which means that elite defense is staying put for at least 1 more year. And this table just lays out Minnesota's game plan for the 2026 season perfectly. Just look at this. On defense, the status is excellent, a top 3 unit by EPA. The goal? Simple. Keep doing what you're doing. But the offense, that's a different story. Disappointing after their 9-8 season in 2025, and the goal is crystal clear. Improve the quarterback play. So with Flores locked in, head coach Kevin O'Connell and the front office can pour almost all of their time, energy, and resources into fixing that side of the ball because they know the defense is in the best hands possible. Their goal is to get back to the playoffs, and honestly, keeping Flores is the biggest possible step they could have taken to make that happen.
So here's the bottom line for Minnesota. The single biggest question they had going into this offseason is now answered. All that uncertainty around their defensive coordinator is gone. They don't have to go find a replacement. They don't have to worry about installing a new scheme. They can just move forward with their planning, their scouting, and their roster building, knowing that a key piece of their leadership is locked in place. That kind of clarity, it's just invaluable for an NFL team. And that brings us right back to the beginning, to this final huge question. This is really the heart of the whole thing. After being passed over again, despite his incredible success, you're just left wondering, will Brian Flores get another chance to be a head coach? Will some team eventually decide that his on-field genius outweighs any of the off-field stuff? Or is this his new reality? Is he destined to be maybe the most overqualified and effective coordinator in the entire NFL, but permanently locked out of that top job? So, what do you think? Is Brian Flores being unfairly kept out of a head coaching job? Or are there valid reasons that teams are staying away? I really want to know your take on this whole complicated story. Drop a comment below and let us know. And hey, if you found this breakdown helpful, please do us a huge favor and subscribe to NFL Nexus and like this explainer. It really helps us keep bringing you these deep dives into the biggest stories around the league. Thanks for watching.